Welcome back to the community, everybody, and thank you all for being part of it. Today, we're doing a video on Super Beetle versus Standard Beetle. Now, it's not a competition between the two styles, but it's to explain the differences for the people that don't know it, and a little bit of added tips and bonuses, as usual with cubic footage, things of that nature. So, let's get on it.
Hey everybody, it's Dan Ledbetter from VW Trends Magazine. Check out what Slade has to say.
Let me ask a question. Do you have your new subscription to VW Trends Magazine? Please go down in the description and get yours. They're back in action. They've been back for a little while. What a great magazine that we've had from our youth. Now, there seems to be some confusion with newcomers and people that have been in the game a little while but never paid attention between the Standard and the Super. Some folks don't even realize or didn't realize there is such thing as a Super Beetle. They just look the same. And I've dealt with that in the past with folks. So let's find out, which one do people think is better? Don't forget to leave it down in the comment section. I like to hear input. You do know that. So let's go over this real quick. I'll keep this video short but fun. Some folks do believe that the Supers were faster and larger that don't really know enough about them. Like I said, it's not to put anybody down. It's just a common thing. When you first look at the Standard Beetle and a Super Beetle, when they're not side by side, somebody new to the game or, still learning and looking around at Beetles probably really doesn't notice the difference. And we're going to tell you a lot about the Super Beetle and compare notes. So my dash pad is off currently. However, a lot of folks will see, for say, a 71 or 72 Super Beetle, which still retained the flat dashboard. And they say, well, there isn't a difference. This is all the same, even the steering wheel. That's untrue. Now, I do admit, I do favor the flat dash, and we'll go over that momentarily. I just think it has that more vintage look. But it does not mean there's not other differences in the car. Now, with the Standard Beetle or Super Beetle, 71, 72 with a flat dash, your fuse box is located almost in the same area. However, the flat dash, which is found in all Standard Beetles and 2 years for the Super, is much easier to work on. Very much at ease with working on the wiring and, easy to navigate everything around under there when need be. Now, is there a size difference with the Super Beetles versus the Standard? Yes, there is. Now, your Super Beetle is absolutely longer. The Super is approximately 162 inches. And I may be off by a quarter inch or so, so don't freak out. That's just a close measurement. So it does make the Super about 3 inches longer than the Standard Beetle. So that's not a lot, of course. Approximately 1.5 to 1.25 inches wider inside. So you really didn't gain a ton of space on width. That's, don't expect a lot of leg and hip room to have expanded in a Super Beetle. So there is a difference in the overall length and the overall width. Very minute though. 3 inches one way and 1.5 inches in the other is not a ton. Let's talk about the weight difference. Is there a weight difference? Now, this is not down to the pound, but the Super Beetle is typically 100 to 150 pound heavier, give or take, depending on the year and things of that nature, because there is a little bit more sheet metal, so to speak. Now, the Standard will weigh in between 1,600 and 1,950 pounds. And again, I read differences all over line, so it's right in that variance. I've noticed it to be mostly around 1,700 pounds and a little bit more for the Standard. The Supers are slightly more, weighing in between 1,700 and 2,100 pounds. The one that I had, the 73, I believe was around 2,150 pounds. Like I said, the weight varies between options and years also. But the key is the larger structure to the Super Beetle. So that's where some of that added weight is coming in. When you did step up to the Super Beetle, I believe Volkswagen's intentions with stepping up was better handling, more trunk space, a little bit more modernized. So they added the McPherson strut suspension instead of the torsion bars like you see here. This point, there we go. All right. Zip tie?
Came off.
Okay, just lay it there a second. Because we'll zip tie the other end.
I'll get it.
Okay. All right. One thing you're going to do, folks, is inspect the leaves. When that came into play and they were able to do this, it changed the whole geometry to the underneath in the front end. Now, while the standard Beetle had the torsion bars, which was not as forgiving, for comfort and riding, that is what they have had all along. With the Super Beetle, with the McPherson struts, it had a little more give to the front end when you were bouncing it up and down. By hand, you could actually move it up and down. The standards with the torsion bars aren't as forgiving. This is oil-filled shocks. This is not gas shocks. But you really can't barely move them. Now, I'm not saying it's horrible, but they're definitely not like the McPherson struts. That's when the Super Beetle became notarized as more comfortable, handling better, and a much more comfortable ride. Not like that, but maybe close. But the Super changed how the Beetle absolutely drove and handled. There's a night and day difference, there really is. The Super Beetle's better handling, the comfort of the ride with that suspension is a very big upgrade. And yes, they do sell lowering struts if you want to lower them, before anybody asks in the comments. If you notice on the standard Beetle, the flat front apron, take a look at the Super Beetle here and you're going to see it curves underneath and has a slotted grill across the bottom. Okay, now some folks do cover them over. I did. Those were there due to having an air conditioning system, but they seem to put it on all of them in the United States. Now, on to the body. Now, on your standard Beetle, the front fenders, the bonnet, and the front apron never changed. However, when it comes to the Super Beetle, yes, those three parts changed. Technically speaking, of course, your inner well's up here slightly too. But the front end is completely different. Just a lot of folks just don't notice it that are not familiar with these cars. So swapping parts over from a Super Beetle to a standard Beetle on the front end, it's not happening. However, from the front of the front door, did I say that right? It is the same all the way back, technically speaking, but you can swap out doors, I believe on 68 and up, maybe 67.
I can't remember.
To the back are basically the same. Now, another big misconception is that the Super Beetles all have curved windshields. That is untrue. We have our 68 here with the flat windshield, but the 71 and 72 Super Beetles also retained the flat windshield, which I really liked. I favor those. The 71 and 72 are my favorite. They still retained the flat dash, the flat windshield for that old school look, and had the better riding comfort and handling of the McPherson strut suspensions. In 1973, the Volkswagen Super Beetle, which was the first on my channel here to do a restoration on, is the one that ended up with the curved windshield. Some say that that was for better visibility. That's not entirely true. Now, it did give a little better visibility. It really did, but that was not their intentions. Now, doing a little bit of research, I found out that they put the curved windshield in and pushed it out further for driver safety, so that basically your face wasn't up against the windshield in the event of an accident. Ugh. But being these cars do not have airbags or anything like we do today, it probably wasn't a bad idea. We ended up installing one, and I was a nervous wreck because them windshields are a lot more expensive. Okay, so
centered in the window.
we got
Bring
to
it
come
down,
my
bring the
way.
bottom down. Bring the put your finger in it. There you go. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
See, then it'll center it up.
And I think, too, the curved windshield also gave it, where we were entering to the 70s, that more upgraded 70s look, so to speak, like the rest of the cars on the road. Then came the dashboard change. In 73, they went to the larger style dash, as you can see that I had on mine in 73.
Now, as you can see, this was an extreme upgrade for any car, going from a flat vintage style dash over to the bulkier, more 70s style custom look, I guess, so to speak. I think VW did a good job on it, and it definitely brought it up to modern date.
Which they are a little more difficult to work on when it comes to the wiring and access. Like I showed you earlier, under the bonnet in the front, you can get to all your wiring. On the big bulkier dash in 73, while trying to gain style for that 70s area with a bigger vinyl dash that gave it more bling bling, I don't think that was our goal. But they were trying to keep up with style. So you could still buy the standard or shell out the money for a Super Beetle. But it did give it a more upgraded feel and an upgraded look. So it wasn't a bad thing. Just a little bit less fun to work on. Now, here is something else kind of small, but the 71 and 72 Super Beetle, not Super Beetle, ended up with the same old school steering wheel, which I prefer. 73 and up ended up with the newer, more 70s style. I think trying to modernize things technically. But 71 and 72, my favorite Supers, still retained that old school dash and the old school steering wheel. Now this is something small too, but maybe big. The Super Beetles had more of a flatter roof than more of a curved roof. Very slight, but they did. But what about this trunk space? Is there much more? While the Super Beetle had 9 to 10 cubic feet of space, or I should say storage space, due to the spare tire laying flat, the windshield washer bottle relocated. It changed the cubic feet from 5 to 10 feet. So that's a pretty drastic change in storage in the front. Now on your standard Beetles, your spare tire is almost in a vertical position. I know it's lightly tilted. However, the gas tank is set towards the front of the car, closer to the front end, to the front bumper. Is that really good? Because of where the front beam is also located. Now, when you move along over to the Super Beetle, under the trunk, should say front trunk, bonnet, whatever you want to call it.
Now, it's quite evident you can see the difference in size, especially since the tire is laying flat and the windshield washer bottle relocated. Gaining 5 cubic feet of space extra was a lot. And like I said, it switched over to being 10 cubic feet. So there really was a big advantage to the Super Beetle's trunk cargo area.
That was the Super Beetle's trunk area inside, thanks to one of our members. So you really did gain a lot of space. When I had my 73, I believe it was, my wife and I used to toss the kids in the back and go shopping, grocery shopping, in, the collapsible bags now, since I don't use paper no more. We actually gained a lot of space. We really did. So if you take the space of the trunk of a Super Beetle, and then behind the back seat, I call it the cargo area, luggage area, and total space combined, it's really not that bad, as opposed to what we have on a standard here. Now, on the standard Beetle, behind the spare wheel, spare tire, is your windshield washer fluid bottle. Yeah. On the Super Beetle, they located it over onto the inner fender. That opened more space up again while the tire laid flat. So it was a genius move, I believe. Due to the geometry of the underneath of the car, they were able to change a lot in the front. It also relocated the gas tank back further away from the front bumper. I ended up doing an electric windshield washer pump. I did a video on that. So mine, I still located it off to the side, so I didn't do anything stupid. That's going down another whole path. Now, there's quite a few folks that believe the Super Beetle has a bigger engine. That's not true. Basically, they all came through with the 1600 dual port motor. Solex 34 3 carburetor, same thing. They did not have a bigger engine because they were called Super Beetle. Although I believe they should have. They'd have been smart pumping it up to a 1700cc. I think they would have sold a lot more of them, although there was many on the road. Now, here's an interesting fact that some of you may or may not know. The 1970 Standard Beetle convertible was the last year for it.
Now, when a friend picked one up, this is a 1970 Standard convertible. It is the last year for the Standard in a convertible option. And I did a video interview on that because I'd never seen the last year of one, to be honest with you.
You wanted a convertible from there on in, 71 and up, clear through to 79. I think early 80s some were labeled as. You were getting a convertible, it was a Super Beetle. Here's a club member that I showed earlier with his 78, and I took a ride in it. What a wonderful car. What a clean car. I love it. He says it's water, so. So Heather's filming from the back. We got the GoPro on the side. Oh, this is nice and smooth. Totally different world. And in 78 and 79, you only got Super Beetle convertibles. It was game over. I find that very interesting. Now, while the Super Beetle may have cost a little bit more, and I do have to check the fact on that, I was a kid in the 70s, but I believe you paid a little bit more for the Super Beetle. Now they are worth less than the Standards. It's really weird because let's take a minute and check out Haggerty together.
Okay, this is Haggerty, and just for some comparisons, I don't believe is on par with the actual real-life market. However, here is a 71 Standard Beetle convertible priced at $12,600. This is in the year 2025. Here's a 71 Super Beetle convertible, and it is priced at $11,700. So, when we move over to the 73 Standard Beetle, it's $13,600, and the 73 Super Beetle sedan is $10,900. So there is a slight difference, but in the real world market, I believe there's a little more difference than what they're actually stating.
But in real world versus Haggerty, I still found that the Super Beetles was worth less than the Standard Beetles, although car prices are falling right now, I guess, due to the economy. However, the Super Beetle, you get a good bang for your buck. And no, they are not harder to work on when it comes to the suspension. A lot of people will say the Supers are harder to work on in the front. They're really not, in all honesty. I found it fairly easy, and I've owned numerous ones over the years. Truthfully, I think the early 60s pin front ends are a little tougher to work on. Just a thought. Do people favor a lot of them more? Yes. The 67 was the 1 year only, so a lot of people are in love with them. I am too. 66 and back look different. 68 and up look different. It's all in what your preference is. Do I think one is better than the other? I do, but we'll keep that to ourselves. Put down in the comments, what is your favorite ear Beetle? What is your favorite ear Beetle? It don't even have to be your own. And tell me what you think. I'm quite sure that some of you have a favorite ear that you could have owned, should have owned, want to own, you may already own. Truthfully, my favorite was always the 68 because that was my first car. Does it make them different? No. Does it make it special? Mm-mm. To me? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I will say that I owned a few Super Beetles over the years, and they do ride nicer. They do handle better. With the standard, yeah, you know, depending on your situation and how you have it set up, you can hit a cigarette butt and be, but, you know, I'm just saying, the Super Beetle, I believe, is superior in comfort and handling and ride, especially on the highways. But you have to purchase what you want. I don't own a Super. I have a standard. I am going to enjoy this car come May 1st, going to shows. I'm looking forward to it. Will it handle a little different on a highway, especially with my swing axle? Probably, but it's okay. We're going to do a couple things with the Z-bar to make it tighter. But that was our video, and stay tuned for the live chat, the Christmas Eve live chat with Heather and I, Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. I did miss last week's. I took a little break due to some family functions, but we will be there for the Christmas chat. Please be there if you can. It will be a lot of fun. We'll probably give away some stickers and magnets while we're in there. And congratulations to Bill Kirkpatrick. Last week, he was the big winner of the big Christmas giveaway. And that was awesome. That really, really made me happy to do. And I thank my donators, who were Kevin and Keith, who donated a few things also. All right, we'll see you Sunday night. Go to the comments. What do you own? Which one? Why do you think it's better? Why do you think the standard is better? Why do you think the super is better? Maybe you don't like either. Maybe you have a trike, and that's cool too. My buddy owned one of them. All right, I better leave. I'm going to just keep talking. Everybody, have a great weekend. I'll see you Sunday night.